one thing I wanted to say about trauma is that different people have different resilience to trauma. It really depends on our life experience. So if you were abused as a child or grew up with neglect or like crazy parenting, then adult abuse is going to have a much stronger effect on you. But also, while you're being abused as an adult, if you have a really strong support system, the trauma might not affect you as deeply. And also, if you're able to resist, there's really cool research about resisting abuse. But if you're able to resist, you might have a less strong response. For me, I had all those factors: bad childhood, no support, and I couldn't resist. So I was very, I was just very affected by the trauma. So, you know, a lot of what I'm going to say, some of it's going to apply, some of it's not. Just, you know, take what's helpful for you. But really, my goal here today is I want you to understand how the trauma has affected you, because I want you to stop blaming yourself for how you are today. And I want you to start having some compassion on yourself, because self-compassion is essential for healing. So personally, I think that we've all been blamed way too long, right? By our husbands, by our family, sometimes by friends, by the church, and of course by ourselves. So this is, you know, one piece of hopefully stopping all that blame that you're living under. Because personally, I know that you are strong. I know that you're resilient. I know that if you're having huge responses to trauma, and reacting in ways you don't want to, that you don't want to be doing that. So that's why I want you to hear all this. Okay, so what is trauma? Trauma is anything that happens in our life that overwhelms our ability to cope. So I think living with an abuser qualifies as trauma. Think about that: lies, manipulation, betrayal, gaslighting, blame shifting, on and on and on. That like overwhelms anybody's ability to cope. And so abuse causes trauma. And so trauma isn't just about what happened. Like if you're out of the abuse, trauma isn't about what happened in the past. It's about the imprint that that abuse has left on your brain and on your body. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I hope today you're going to get a glimpse as why the abuse turned you from this like peaceful, compassionate woman into this like mess, right? Self-doubt, nervous, panicked, anxious, confused. It's not your fault. That is because of the trauma you've been through. Let's talk about symptoms that come from being traumatized by abuse. I'm going to read these off. Feeling anxious, having a chronic sense of panic, feeling like your nervous system is on high alert, feeling overwhelmed by life, feeling unsafe even when the abuse is over, having a hard time thinking, concentrating, making decisions, getting spaced out, having low motivation for things in your life, easily triggered by events or conversations, feeling like you can't control how you feel, having racing thoughts, like, okay, you know those conversations that go on in your head over and over and over and over again? Okay, that's from trauma. Having trouble sleeping, not trusting yourself, losing your sense of purpose or direction in your life, feeling chronically unsafe in your body, feeling exhausted, that's from trauma. Shutting down, feeling helpless and empty and trapped and weighed down. And then dissociation, which is totally feeling disconnected from yourself, from your body, your feelings. You know, you feel empty inside. Oh, I used to feel so empty inside. You feel like nobody, you're like somebody else, and you feel disconnected from other people, from yourself, and from God. So ultimately, trauma robs you of the feeling that you are in charge of yourself at all. But this is not a character flaw. It's not a moral failing. It's not from sin. These are the symptoms of trauma that are originating in your body. They're not in your feelings, they're not in your thoughts, they're not in the choices that you're making, because your body has become dysregulated by trauma. Now I want to talk about how this dysregulation happens to us. So God made our bodies to be totally amazing. I hope you know that. And He created these automatic body systems to help us in emergencies. So like if you step off the curb and you almost get hit by a car, the alarm bells go ringing off in your brain. This engages your nervous system to go into high alert, and all sorts of things are happening in your body to give you like focus and speed and strength to get you out of that danger. I fell one time, broke my ankle. I was carrying my baby and I landed on top of him, and I ran home an entire block on a broken ankle because I thought I had hurt my son. He was fine. I wasn't. But in any case, that's the whole body gearing up for danger. And you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Your heart pounds, your blood pressure goes up, you get that rush of adrenaline, your breathing gets shallow, and you're acting on instinct rather than thinking things through. So this is a great system for danger, but God created our system to calm down when that danger is over. And when we're being abused, those alarm bells that set this whole system off are ringing constantly. And so that constant ringing of the alarm bells is what causes the dysregulation. The calming, regulating part of our nervous system has to take a back seat to the survival system, and then our body ends up getting stuck on high alert. And it changes our brain. And then those changes in our body are what causing the symptoms that I talked about. And it even changes our experience of ourself, even after we're free from abuse. And then all of this is what causes what's called PTSD, or chronic complex PTSD. Because see, God did not create us to live under abuse. And if people in the church who think we should stay with an abuser could understand how it's affecting our body and how God created our body to want to be calm, I think they'd maybe get a little different perspective, but you never know. Let's talk now about how trauma is really affecting our body to be causing the symptoms. See, today I'm going to talk about our nervous system in a pretty simple way. So we have two nervous systems, and don't worry about the names, just think about how this is affecting you. We have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the survival system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the calming one. It's called the rest and digest. It keeps us in balance and keeps us calm. Now, there are two opposing nervous systems. It's like the brake and the gas in the car. So when one is on, the other one's off. So God designed us to live in the calming rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system, except when we're threatened. So when the alarm bells go off in our brain in response to a threat, and abuse is a threat, it activates the sympathetic nervous system and causes us to go into fight, flight, or freeze. Now, these are your body's survival instincts. They're triggered automatically. We have very little control over them, maybe none. So flight is preparing us to fight back and defend ourselves. Flight is getting away from danger, running, great survival skill. And freeze happens when we can't go into fighting or fleeing. We end up freezing, like a deer in the headlights. And we end up numbing out. So if we can't stop the threat, the abuse, or if we have to stay in the abuse, then our body keeps activating this survival response. And this survival response is continuing long after one abuse event, because our body knows that we're living with an abuser, and so it's constantly activating it. And so it's getting activated way too strongly and way too often. So stress hormones are being secreted, the brain circuits are firing, the nervous system is on high alert, and over time, our nervous system gets stuck on high alert, and it never is able to calm down to that calm place that God has designed us to live in. So then after living with abuse, or during living with abuse, we end up having a changed nervous system that we can't control. So it takes longer to return to baseline and be calm. It spikes very quickly, even from minor threats or stresses. And then stress just becomes harder and harder to deal with. I have a feeling you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like our nervous system becomes this TSA agent, and every single circumstance or person is just a potential terrorist that we have to watch out for. And then what happens? We're accused by friends, we're accused by family, we're accused by our church, and that is ingraining the threat that we're living with even more deeply because we can't find safety. So what happens is we get stuck in this overreactive state in our life. Now, if you're stuck in flight, you probably tend to get angry and have outbursts and want to lash out. If you're stuck in flight, you feel very panicked and afraid and trapped and restless. And if you're stuck in freeze, you end up just numbing out, which is really what happens after long-term abuse to many, many of us. And we can be stuck in more than one of these or alternate between them as well. So, you know, our physical stress load, it's like a cup. And when we're on this chronic high alert, stuck in this overreactive state, that cup is full. And so any difficult situation, you know, arguing with your child, dealing with an unsupportive friend, trying to find a new job, that just makes that cup completely overflow, and we can't handle those kinds of stressors well at all. And that's why we end up having so many triggers in our life, just like, you know, things just are happening and we just are constantly in that state. This is physiological. Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention about our nervous system is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is way cool, and I could talk about it for a long time, but I'll keep it very, very short today. The vagus nerve is like this bundle of nerves. It's big, and it goes from our brainstem all the way down to our gut. And there are little nerves that come off the vagus nerve that come around our face, and they come around all the organs in our body. And the vagus nerve is constantly sending signals from our brain to our body and our body to our brain. And trauma really affects our vagus nerve, and our vagus nerve is the calming system in our body. It's very important for calming. And the emotions that we experience, we're actually experiencing physically in our vagus nerve. And so, like, that's why you get that gut-wrenching feeling. I just remember that so well, or that just that heart-wrenching feeling. That's the vagus nerve reacting to the abuse, to your situation. Now, healing involves learning how to turn off the alarms on a physical level and bring that calming system back to run the show again in our body and in our life. You know, I talked in the last video when I shared my healing story, I talked about deep breathing. Breathing very deeply into the belly, taking inhales that are longer than exhales. One reason that that's so effective is that it can bring the calming nervous system and the vagus nerve back online. I hope that you'll continue to do that in very deep, slow, calming breathing. It's really helping your body. There are a lot of other things you can do as well. Okay, so now I want to talk about our brain. I love this stuff. Okay, but I'm going to keep it very simple and short. But as I talk about what trauma does to our brain, I want you to think about how the abuse was affecting you while you were in it, or now if you're still in it, and then how the long-term effects of how your brain was affected you is still affecting you today. I think this part is going to like really make some lights go off. It's absolutely fascinating. So during abuse, the parts of the brain I'm going to talk about go offline because trauma, survival, right? And then also after abuse, they are still not functioning properly, leading to the symptoms that we have. So the thinking part of our brain goes offline when we're being traumatized. And so that leads to the difficulty with problem solving, concentration, memory, organization, decision making, motivation. Decisions used to be so hard for me. They just would like completely shut me down. My prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of my brain, was just really not functioning. Okay, then there's another part of the brain, and that processes our experiences and the information that's coming to us from life. That part of our brain isn't working. So that makes it hard to see what's going on and to draw the proper conclusions from our experiences and remember them. And then after, well, also during, but both, during and after abuse, it's hard to distinguish between what's relevant and not, leading to triggers from simple things that on a, if we hadn't been traumatized, wouldn't have triggered us at all. Then there's a part of our brain that helps us understand our experience, and that part of the brain is getting blunted. And this also blunts our ability to experience pleasure and feeling alive, joy. Okay. Then the brain, okay, I mentioned this, the brain alarm system is going off saying danger, 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 sending signals to the nervous system. Well, and when that happens, the thinking brain is reduced and going offline. Then another part of our brain, the processing system, which is needed to resolve trauma, that isn't functioning correctly. And so the trauma doesn't get processed and it gets frozen in time. And now, not only are we living with the present abuse, but we're also, all the previous abuse has not been processed either. So we're living with a lot of abuse, all simultaneously. You see why we cannot cope with this? Okay, then also the brain's ability to use imagination gets shut down. Now, if you can't imagine things, it's really hard to change your life. People ask, why do women stay? Well, we all know why. Well, this is one piece. We can't even imagine a life different because our brain is not working right. And then the last one I want to mention is that the speech center, the thing I'm using right now to explain this stuff to you, that goes offline. So like that's why you feel dumbfounded by abuse. You can't even explain it. Now, okay, I love this part. There's a different part of our brain that processes four-letter words, and that part of our brain does not go offline during trauma, which is why those four-letter words are coming through so easily, at least into your mind, if they don't come out of your mouth. I think that's pretty funny. So basically, in addition to what I just mentioned about our brains, the neurochemicals are out of balance. The actual size of the parts of our brain that we need to function are shrink. The connectivity between the different regions in our brain doesn't work properly. Our brain waves are getting all messed up. Our body chemistry is out of whack. I mean, it's like this is a mess. So, and in daily life, they've shown through neuroscience research, study of the brain, that parts of the brain that get activated just in daily life for a traumatized person are different than the parts of the brain that get activated in a non-traumatized person. So we are truly dealing with a changed brain and a changed nervous system, and we're stuck in this overreactiveness. And all of this is having this huge effect on our thoughts and on our feelings, that overwhelmed, hopeless, depressed, disconnected, anxiety, it's coming from our brain and our body. It's not coming from our decisions or sin or anything like that. And this, all of this is having this huge effect on our ability to sort out our feelings, to make decisions, to change our thoughts, to see options for ourselves. And also a part of our brain that's the timekeeper goes offline, and so it feels like this is never going to end. And that's where we're stuck. Okay, let me check on comments. Okay, it makes so much sense. Good, I'm glad that this is making sense. Just, you know, this information, I just felt like it really changed everything for me. It just changed everything. That's why I want to share it with you. Okay, so a woman in a group told me that all this information I'm using was used against her in court to make her lose custody, and by questioning her ability to parent. Okay, there are like a million things wrong with that. Like if the abuser is saying that she's traumatized from living with him and so now she can't parent, he's kind of admitting to the abuse. But anyway, I don't need to go into those details. I'm sure all of you understand how so wrong that is. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about here. I am not saying that you can't hold down a job. I'm not saying you can't parent. I know it's harder. It's a lot harder. I know that from personal experience. But we can be smart and competent and still deal with the effects of trauma. What I'm talking about here is our relationship to ourself, our relationship to our life and how we experience things and process things, and how we heal from the trauma. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So now I know for some of you, and this is so true for me, talk therapy has not helped you as much as you were hoping. So let me explain why. Well, even though we grew up being told that if you talk about your feelings, that will resolve them, neuroscience research has shown that that's actually not true, because the experience of trauma itself gets in the way of being able to process through thinking and talking. And so trauma changes how we think and what we think about, and even our capacity to think. See, when these alarm bells are ringing that you're in danger, even after abuse, they're still ringing. No matter how much insight and understanding you get to why you're responding a certain way, that rational brain can't talk your overreactive brain and system out of keeping you hypervigilant. It's not a rational process. That's why you need tools for your whole system, your brain, your body, and of course your thinking and your feeling. Now, I'm not saying that understanding and insight and information is not important and helpful, because it is. I mean, I have a whole blog about that. I think it's valuable, valuable, valuable. But it won't lead to the kind of healing that you want. And also, we have very real feelings from abuse. I'm not saying we don't. I mean, the grief is overwhelming. The betrayal, the anger, those are all real. They're legit. And we have lies. We have brainwashing. We have lots of stuff to sort through. What I'm talking about here in terms of the trauma in our body is when we get stuck. We are just stuck. We're stuck in the lies. We're stuck in the feelings. We're stuck in those symptoms and in reactions to abuse. And so when our body gets calm, the talk therapy can help. The tools of changing our thoughts, they can start really helping much more effectively. But we have to be working on our body as well. Because, you know, God created us, this whole being. He created us with a body, a brain, with our thoughts and our feelings, with our spirit. And we need healing for all those parts of ourselves, because God created all those parts to be working in harmony. And abuse throws us out of harmony in a huge way. So when we have the tools to restore the proper balance between the rational brain and that reactive brain that's on high alert, then we can calm ourselves down, be back in the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what helps us start to feel in charge of how we respond and how we feel and what we think and the decisions that we make. And we start to feel in charge of our life again. We start to feel in charge of ourself again. It's amazing. It's wonderful. I live that way. I love it. I absolutely love it. Because that's what brings peace. So, okay, that's kind of all I wanted to share about trauma. What are we at? Oh, we're at half an hour. I can get talking, let me tell you. So I created Arise, the membership group that I'm opening in January, to teach you the tools to calm your body down, to work on all the parts of your body, your brain, your body, your mind, your emotions, and your spirit, to bring them all back into harmony so that you can find that peace that you want. If you want to learn more about Arise, you can go to my website, confusiontoclaritynow.com, and then /Arise. And there's a waiting list if you want to join. Jody says the sense of void inside, like something fundamental was taken out of you. You feel like a shell, something missing in the middle of me. Oh my goodness. I remember waking up after my husband moved out, my then husband, and sitting on the edge of the bed and looking inside and going, I'm empty. There's nothing inside of me. What do I even do? Yeah, well, I don't feel that way anymore. I know who I am. I'm real. I exist. It's wonderful. You are welcome, everybody. Hugs to you, hugs back. I love you guys. And I'm going to end now. And comment on the video so other people can see it. Okay, see you later.